I've got 3 new Buffalo Bills mock draft scenarios to present to you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, folks, welcome in. Very excited to work through 3 new Buffalo Bills 4-round mock draft scenarios. We did this end of last week, and I'm not going to lie to you, I couldn't wait to do it again. The second I was done with that, I wanted to do more of these mock draft simulations because I think they're so useful. Not that we're going to nail down exactly what the Bills are going to do. That's probably not going to happen. But these are very useful thought exercises in presenting scenarios so that we can be aware of different outcomes and the different possibilities and what makes sense and what doesn't. And as I live through this crunch right now, that is the final days before the 2024 NFL draft, I have to ask myself questions. What are the most meaningful conversations that I can have with you on this podcast? We could talk all about mid-round running backs or day 3, defensive line targets, all that type of stuff. But I think working through these scenarios just makes a lot of sense for us to do at this point in the lead up to the NFL draft. So I have 3 scenarios coming your way today, and we're going to work through them. The first one's going to be the idea of the Bills picking a non-wide receiver at 28 and then trading up for a wide receiver in the second round. That was the most requested scenario that you guys had for me coming out of the end of last week when we did this. Then I want to do a mock draft simulation that is considering what we're not thinking about at all, right? So it's a very unique spin on what things could look like. And then I want to close it out with another trade back. Coming out of last time, it felt like most of the momentum where people really liked the outcome was for the trade back. And so we're going to do that again and give you a different look at what that could ultimately look like. All right, we're going to use the Pro Football Network mock draft simulator. Last time we did PFF. This time we are doing PFN. The one rule that I have for myself is that across these 3 simulations, no repeat selections. So we'll get into as many different players as we can throughout this process. So let's get into it. And the first one is the scenario where the Bills do not pick a wide receiver in the first round, and then they trade up for a wide receiver in the second round. So let's start this one. And the reality here is the more that I get into this and I work through scenarios and I work through evaluations, the more comfortable I am with the Bills not picking a wide receiver at 28. I don't think you do it just to do it. I think you can get a comparable receiver potentially at pick 28 that you can at pick 60. And I feel like there's a crop of players that are just better prospects at other positions and other positions of need than whatever wide receiver you could quote unquote force at 28. So I'm pretty open to the Bills not picking a wide receiver at 28. I know that there's a lot of people that would probably lose their mind. I did an entire episode a week or so ago that was called "What if the Bills don't pick a wide receiver in the first round of the 2024 NFL draft?" I'd encourage you to check that one out, but I'm pretty open to this scenario. Not going to lie to you. So let's do it. The first one here is picking a non-wide receiver at 28. Cooper DeJean, the safety defensive back out of Iowa, is the pick that I'm going to make. And to me, he makes a lot of sense for the Bills. I think he's just a really good player. He's a guy that I just feel comfortable with being able to put him in a bunch of different spots in the secondary and know that he can perform. He's got great athleticism. He's super physical, a great tackler, unbelievable ball skills. I mean, I think he's a playmaker, and I think he can right away be a matchup-specific type player, help you against tight ends and man coverage, can play in deep zones. He tackles. He can be an extra box defender. There's so much versatility that he offers, and I feel like this team could just use playmaking in the back seven. And so if he's on the board at 28, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that he's not the clear best player available. And so I want to give you some different scenarios this time around. Cooper DeJean this time at pick 28. And then the idea is we're going to trade up for a wide receiver in the second round. So let's do that now that we've picked Cooper DeJean. We need to get a wide receiver, and the Bills are picking 60th. And, you know, the way that trades are calculated in the NFL draft is that every pick has a point value assessed to it. And there's different trade value charts that have different assessments for what the picks are worth. But generally speaking, you can find some consensus here to understand how this all works. And generally speaking, pick 60, where the Bills are currently scheduled to pick in the second round, is worth 300 points. And so the next picks that the Bills have, when you think, all right, what picks do we have to package to get up? What are they worth and how high can we get? Well, their next pick is at 128. That's worth 44 points. And so if you package 60 and 128, that probably gets you to around 55. If you package 133, that gets you about another 40 points. 144 gets you another 34 points. 160 gets you 27 points. 163 gets you 26. And so you just don't have that much ammunition to move up, right? Without that third round pick, it's a little bit tough. So here's what I'm going to propose here is that the Bills send pick 128, of course, pick 60. So pick 60, pick 128, and pick 144. That gets us to around pick 50. We can move up 10 spots. And we're going to pick wide receiver Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. A player that I like quite a bit, very detailed route runner. He's twitchy, sudden, fluid, snappy through his breaks, can really manipulate coverage with how he runs routes, elite hands, body control, and concentration, tracks the ball extremely well, has been a prolific punt returner, a 3-level threat, has some yards after catchability, really good-looking prospect. You maybe wish he had a little bit more functional strength, probably a guy that is better in the slot, but you could play him sometimes on the perimeter. He will be 24 during his rookie season. So there's some things to be mindful of here, but a really, really outstanding prospect. So in this scenario, the Bills are going to trade up to get him. And candidly, in working through it, I didn't love the idea. I felt like parting with pick 128 and 144 to move up 10 spots for Ricky Pearsall when there's comparable receivers to get at 60 just didn't make a lot of sense to me. So as I worked through this, and I'm glad that I did, I came away very much not loving the idea of trading up in the second round for the wide receiver. I'd rather just let it come to me at 60. I just don't feel like there's enough that differentiates these prospects, in my opinion, to part with 2 additional players that you could draft later on to go get this one guy. It doesn't make sense to me. And I'm glad I did it so that I can really come to grips with that. If the Bills are going to trade up in the second round, I would hope that it's for a defensive player. Like stick and pick some wide receiver at 28 and then trade up for a defensive player, some defensive lineman potentially from 60. That makes a lot more sense to me than this. So I'm glad I did it. Don't love the idea. So that way I can uncover this through working through this thought exercise. So now we've went through this. We have Cooper DeJean, the defensive back out of Iowa at 28. At pick 50, after we trade 128 and 144 to the Philadelphia Eagles for pick 50, we get Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver out of Florida. Then our next pick is 133. Again, we're only doing 4 rounds. So we parted with one of our 4th-round picks. That means we have 1 left. Javon Baker, the pick here, wide receiver, UCF. I think one of the interesting things about Javon Baker, I know that some people have talked about him as a candidate for pick 60 in the second round. It feels like the projections and stuff that I'm starting to see really showcases him more as a 3rd or a 4th round guy. And I think it's reasonable to think that he could be available at pick 133. I like him quite a bit. I have him as a mid-3rd round grade. So I'm comfortable, I'm fairly comfortable with him at 60, but you might not have to pick him there. You could kind of wait. And Javon Baker, really big time down the field production at UCF, 6'1", 202 pounds, over 32-inch arms, crazy yards per catch, 52 catches for 1,139 yards last year, over 14 yards average depth of target. Does have some drops on tape, but I love his release package. I love his ability to get on top of corners and make them play through him. And I think there's just more to unlock with his overall game. And so after getting Pearsall, who I think is a pretty polished prospect that I think can come in and contribute right away, I think there's a little bit more of a ceiling here to unlock with Javon Baker, who gives you some legit size to play on the perimeter and some really good play strength. So I think he's one of my favorite kind of fallback size options in the middle rounds. And in this scenario, him being available on the Pro Football Network simulator at pick 133 made it a fairly easy choice for me. So in this scenario of picking a non-wide receiver at 28 and then trading up in the second round 4-1, we get Cooper DeJean at 28, Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver from Florida, at 50, and then Javon Baker, the wide receiver at UCF, at 133. Keeping in mind, we still have, even after the trade up, pick 160, 163, 200, 204, and 248, where you can get some developmental players for the D-line, maybe a safety, running back, different other positions that are of need. So there's scenario one. Scenario two coming up is going to be fun. It's the what we're not thinking about scenario. Excited to work through that for you, so be sure to stick with me. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to be certain that you can find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you find professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Also on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate to hire within 24 hours. So you can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Well, LinkedIn's always looking for ways to make the hiring process easier for you. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process quicker and more simple. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, let's get through this mock draft simulation of what we're not thinking about. So we're going to stick and pick with these selections. So the normal picks that the Bills have in the first four rounds. But I want to get into some stuff here that maybe we're not considering. And I think that's important to do because you look through some of the more recent Bills draft picks, whether it's Dalton Kincaid, whether it's Greg Rousseau, Kyer Elam, not a lot of people were expecting those to be the selections. And so we were kind of working through some stuff in our Discord channel. And if you would like to be part of our Discord channel, join the Locked On Bills subtext community. There's a link in today's show notes to join that'll allow you access to the Discord channel where we have over 700 Bills fans talking Bills, NFL draft, all kinds of stuff. It's really, really fun. And, you know, we had a member in there saying, you know, what about the Bills getting like an offensive lineman, maybe a long-term answer at center for Josh Allen? And I was like, well, I don't know about that. Why aren't we thinking of Connor McGovern as that option? And then Duke Manyweather, who's an offensive line trainer, made a comment on Twitter about, you know, maybe some teams being higher than pick 29 in the draft being interested in Zach Frazier. And I kind of spoiled it right there. Zach Frazier is going to be the pick here at 28, but like I think this is a worthwhile scenario for us to consider. So let's consider something that we're not thinking about with this next iteration, and let's do it. So at pick 28, I have the Bills drafting Zach Frazier, center from West Virginia. And like I mentioned, Duke Manyweather, who's Zach Frazier's trainer, tweeted out, there are some teams before pick 29 that want Frazier. Well, the Bills pick at 28, so that's worth noting. And Zach Frazier is very, very Billsy. Very Billsy. 46-game starter at West Virginia. 4-time state champion wrestler in high school. You know that Sean McDermott's going to love that. His mom's side of the family includes 4 high school state champion wrestlers, his grandfather and 3 of his uncles. And then his dad's side of the family is all football players, and his dad used to coach, I think, at the high school level. And then also his last game in college, after starting like 46 games in a row, it was against Baylor. And West Virginia had the ball. They're trying to get a 2-minute drive in to come back and win. They're trailing by like 4 points. And he breaks his leg on the play. And they don't have any timeouts left. And he didn't want the team to get a 10-second runoff. And so he gets himself off the field with a broken leg so that his team didn't have to have the 10-second runoff. And then they actually go on and win the game. So pretty cool, right? You know, big-time competitor, wrestling background. He's Billsy through and through. I think he's in play for the Bills. And we're not really talking about that. So we now are talking about that. So Zach Frazier in the we're not thinking about this stuff mock draft, he's the pick at 28. At pick 60, we're going to go with Roman Wilson, the wide receiver out of Michigan. 5'11", 185 pounds. Really good player. He's explosive. He can work all levels of the field. Comes from a very pro-style offense at Michigan. Tons of speed, plucky hands. I mean, really, really good hands. Even for a little guy, 185, not little, 5'11", 185's fine size. You know, very good in contested situations. Really good body control. Really good hands. Good yards after catch ability. So I'd love him at pick 60, to be honest with you. I think you could maybe say, well, maybe you wish that you had more of a true perimeter player when you already have the abundance of slot options that you do. I think you look at his career at Michigan, he did play 40% of his snaps out wide. I wouldn't say that physicality is really a big-time strength of his game, right? I wish he was stronger, had a little bit more contact balance. But I think between the thing about the Bills slot receivers that they currently have, whether it is Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir, they're not slot onlys, right? Like, they're better in the slot, but they're not slot only players. And so I think if you have enough guys that maybe are better in the slot, but do have interchangeability, you might be okay. And so that's what can get me into a receiver like a Roman Wilson, or even apply that to Ricky Pearsall, or apply that to Ladd McConkey. Other guys that we talk about that are probably better in the slot, that doesn't mean they can't play outside. And so that's kind of the lens that I look at it through. And I think Roman Wilson, you know, big high character guy, big time football character, very Billsy player as well. So that's our second round pick. And the Bills don't have a third round pick. They have 2 fourth round picks. At pick 128, we're going to go with Muhammad Kamara, the edge rusher from Colorado State. 33-game starter in college. In those 33 games, 45.5 tackles for loss, 30.5 sacks, 6'1", 250 pounds. Ran 4.57 40-yard dash with a 1.57 10-yard split. Tons of production. He's a guy that, you know, the Bills need more impact off the edge, in my opinion. And I think this guy can come in as a designated pass rusher that can develop and help round out this edge rush rotation. Then at pick 133, we're going with Brendan Rice, the wide receiver out of USC. 6'2", 208 pounds, 4.50 in the 40-yard dash, 33-inch arms. Yes, he is the son of Jerry Rice. And apparently that relationship wasn't always super strong. I think they've gotten closer later on in life. He didn't grow up living in the same house as Jerry. But later in life, I think they've connected and have become close. You look at his career at USC, and I'm kind of surprised that he wasn't more productive. You know, even with Caleb Williams as the quarterback, who's going to be the number 1 overall pick in Lincoln Riley's offense. 2 years ago, he had 39 catches for 611 yards and 4 touchdowns. This past year, 45 catches for 791 yards and 12 touchdowns. I think he's a nice blend of size, athleticism, body control, and hands. I wish he was more of a route technician. Wish he had a little bit more separation quickness. Wish he was a little bit more physical for a, almost 210-pound receiver. But I think that there's a nice trajectory with this player. Obviously, the NFL bloodlines exist, and he's appealing to me as a 4th-round pick, right? You got to be mindful. When we're talking about players that are in the middle rounds, they're not complete prospects, right? If you're looking for a complete receiver, it's tough to find that outside of the top 3 in this draft. And so I think you have to then look at what they can do and how they can help your offense and see if it's a worthwhile investment. You have to be mindful. When I'm talking about these players and I'm bringing up their deficiencies, that's okay. You're a 4th-round pick. We're not expecting you to be able to do everything. What can you do? How useful is that? And can it help our football team, right? That's the question that you have to ask yourself. So I just want to point that out as I kind of get into deficiencies with players. Keep that in mind. If you're a perfect prospect, we're talking about you as a top 10 guy. Well, there's 250 something picks in the draft. Not everybody's going to have the ability to check every single box. So in this scenario of what we're not thinking about mock draft, Zach Frazier, center, West Virginia in the first round, who is super Billsy, right? We talked about that. But also, for as much as they've talked about Connor McGovern and him shifting over to center, really hasn't done it in the NFL. And that assumes that David Edwards is going to be the left guard. I like David Edwards. He started 4 games over the last 2 seasons in the NFL. It's worth us considering this idea. They've transitioned this interior offensive line quite a bit, and that was by choice. They did not have to cut Mitch Morse. They did not have to trade away Ryan Bates. They did this on purpose, and maybe part of that is getting another young asset to pair with Osiris Torrance to keep Connor McGovern at left guard. You've already locked in Deion Dawkins, right? You want that stability. You know that Brandon Beane cares about this offensive line. I just think we need to be more open to the idea of it being in play early in the draft and even at 28. So 28, Zach Frazier, center, West Virginia. 60, Roman Wilson, wide receiver out of Michigan. 128, Muhammad Kamara, edge, Colorado State. 133, Brendan Rice, wide receiver out of USC. All right, our final scenario is coming up here in just a moment. It's another trade back. I think you're going to like it, so be sure to stick with me. I've been told that I'm a competitive person. You think that's true? Well, yeah, it is. I think we all have a competitive side to us, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, and it's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself, and the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or on Google Play. All right, folks, let's trade back. I'm a big fan of this idea. Big fan of this idea. Now, there's certain players that I would not trade away from. We're going to get into that next week. I'll have my full Bills-specific draft board for you next week. And through that, we're going to talk about talent cliffs and players that you don't move away from. We're going to get in. There's so many good conversations coming next week. Of course, it's draft week. But I love this idea of trading back. So here's what we're going to do. I found the perfect team to trade back with, right? You need somebody that wants to come up. I look at the Atlanta Falcons. They have a good amount of draft capital. I think they have the 9th most draft capital of any team in this draft. They just signed Kirk Cousins, who's upper 30s, coming off of an Achilles injury. They're in a win now mode. Of course, they want to get some young talent, but you don't make those moves without telling us that you're trying to win right now. They own picks 8, 43, 74, 79, 109, 143, 187, 197. Perfect team to come back into the first round. And they need defense, right? I think they're going to pick probably Dallas Turner, the edge rusher out of Alabama at number 8. And then I think they'd love to get a corner. And whether it's, I don't think Quinyon Mitchell gets there, but if it's Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama, Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, Terrion Arnold out of Alabama, one of those are there. I could see them wanting to move up. And of course, I can see the Bills wanting to move out. So here's the deal. The Bills move from 28 to 43. The difference in pick 28 and 143 is 190 points. So the Falcons would need to make up 190 points to justify this trade up, or in the Bills' mind, to justify this trade back. Well, Atlanta owns pick 79, which is equal to 195 points. So it's a very clean trade. So 28 to 43, the Bills pick up pick 79. So now the Bills have 43, 60, 79, and then their 2 fourth-round picks. Let's talk about what this can look like. So the Bills move back 28 to 43. They draft Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. Really good player. A lot of speed. Really good route runner. Really good hands. Very similar to everything I said about Ricky Pearsall. You wish he had a little bit more play strength, but a good player. The Bills have done a lot of work on Ladd McConkey. Part of me thinks that's because of the medicals. He has knee tendonitis, had a back issue that cost him 4 games this year, also had a high ankle sprain. I think they're probably doing their due diligence on medicals, but I've seen some Emmanuel Sanders comps out there for Ladd McConkey. I can get behind it. I think that makes a lot of sense, and therefore you can see him making a lot of sense for the Buffalo Bills. So at 43, they get Ladd McConkey. At 60, we get ourselves another wide receiver. You know, at some point I had to get a Xavier Leggete on the Bills, wide receiver, South Carolina. I remain extremely confused about the projection of where Xavier Leggete's going to go. If you told me he's going to go 25, I'd believe you. If you told me he was going to go 70, I'd believe you. I don't know predictively where this player is going to go. I know that I value him very highly. I'd pick him at 28 and not think twice about it. I've said that so many times. I think he'd be a perfect player for this Bills team. 6'1", 220 pounds, 4.39 40-yard dash. I think he's dynamic with the ball in his hands. You know, I know I had Chris Chapasso on the show yesterday. Him and I don't see Xavier Leggete similarly. I think he's awesome with the ball in his hands. I think he is a big-time tackle breaker, breaks pursuit angles. I think he is a good route runner in terms of he's always going to be a little better on the linear plane. You know, if you're asking him to snap off hard horizontal breaks and run that route like Antonio Brown, that's not really going to be his game. But boy, there are so many different ways that he can win. And I love the physicality, size, explosiveness, big playability, 3-level skill that Xavier Leggete would offer this team. So we trade back and we double dip at wide receivers and come away with Ladd McConkey and Xavier Leggete. I mean, how exciting is that? I think that's incredible. Then at pick 79, which we picked up in the trade back, we're going with Brandon Dorlus, a defensive lineman out of Oregon. He could play, I think you could play him on the outside or the inside. 6'3", 283 pounds, 33.25-inch arms, RAS score of an 8.66, 3-year starter, played in 51 consecutive games. That's pretty impressive. He's got all the size, length, physicality, burst. I love it. Does well to play with extension. A lot of length. He's that type of defensive lineman that can lock, peek, and shed, make plays. Heavy hands with knockback power. He is really good at getting his hands in throwing lanes. Had 8 pass breakups in 2023, which is a ton for a defensive lineman. I think you see some of that athleticism show up as a pass rusher when he's rushing interior gaps. He just has that quick twitch nature about him for 283 pounds. And when he's able to kind of grease an angle and has a lane to close, he's got a lot of burst. Now, I think the biggest thing with Dorlus is he's high-hipped, and that means he plays a little bit tall. So, keeping his pads down and playing with good leverage is something that has to get better. And I think he's really good at activating his hands and playing with extensions. I want to see him develop more counters to get off blocks. But I really like the player. I think he'd fit really well into this Bills defensive line rotation. And I think pick 79 is very appropriate value. Then we still have our 2 fourth-round picks. We're going to go with Malik Mustafa, safety, Wake Forest at 128. 2-year starter for the Demon Deacons. Physical, smart in coverage, stays leveraged. You talk about playing 2 high safeties. I think he's the perfect split zone safety. He's good at coming downhill and tackling, and then he just stays leveraged. He just kind of does his job. Like a boringly solid football player that should be really good on special teams and, could be your safety 3 this year and, maybe take the place of Mike Edwards or Taylor Rapp in 2025. Then at pick 133, we're going to go with Kamani Vidal, a running back out of Troy. Talked about him last week. 5'7", 213 pounds, ran 4.46 in the 40-yard dash. Tons of production at Troy. I mean, unbelievable production. He's been durable across 40 starts, outstanding in pass protection, outstanding in short yardage. I think those are the 2 things that this Bills running back room is missing. Pass protection, short yardage. Kamani Vidal does that in a big-time way. And so I love this scenario. You trade back, you get Ladd McConkey, Xavier Leggete, the wide receiver out of South Carolina at 60, defensive line help at pick 79 in the form of Brandon Dorlus out of Oregon. I think your 2 fourth-round picks, Malik Mustafa, safety, Wake Forest, Kamani Vidal, running back, Troy. So, as always, I want to hear from you. Let you tell me what you thought of these scenarios. What do you like? What do you not like? How is this informing your perspective of what the Bills could do? Are you more willing to accept an idea of the Bills not picking a wide receiver at 28? I think there's so many possibilities that we have to be mindful of. And as I repeatedly say, the silliest thing that you can do as a fan of a team entering an NFL draft is to marry yourself to specific outcomes. You have to have an open mind. You have to, or else you're just going to set yourself up to be disappointed. There are so many different ways that this can go. And I know we're all talking wide receivers. Some people are talking defensive line. Some people are talking safety. Running backs on the table. We just got into a conversation about interior offensive line, how that makes sense. The point is there's so much to get done. There's so many different ways to do it. Keep an open mind and let's let it play out and see what happens, because this is a draft, as Chris Trapasso pointed out yesterday in the podcast, that gives the Bills the opportunity to really start writing the next chapter of the Josh Allen era for the Buffalo Bills. And so it's not just about one thing. It's about a lot of different things, replenishing the depth on this roster, getting some developmental upside, and also finding some immediate answers. And so how does Brandon Beane get that done? Well, that's why they pay him the big bucks, but hopefully these scenarios helped you come to terms with all the different possibilities that do exist. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.